What's the saddest thing that happened to an old school friend you don't see anymore? Best friend in elementary school got deported back to Russia with his abusive parents. Used to spend all day at my place to avoid going home. The saddest thing that happened to someone I know from school is nothing. He never did anything. After high school, when everyone went off to college and got jobs and whatever, he didn't. He stayed at home with his parents. They're past retirement age, but they still work to support him. He got very fat, already was a little chunky back when I knew him, and just hangs out at home all day as far as I know. He plays video games, watches TV. Basically has all of the same interests he did in high school, even though it has been years. And of course, he has no romantic or social life. I avoid him whenever I go home to visit family because he always wants to meet, read, drink in someone's basement, and have these reliving the good old days moments where all we do is talk about things that happened years and years ago. Because those are the only good memories he has. So, even though people from my class have died, become drug addicts, etc., this one is still the saddest. She married a classmate, they became teachers and celebrated every anniversary of their marriage by going to Disneyland. They moved just about an hour away, and thanks to Facebook I could still see what she was up to with her life, like fundraising events for her students and fun recipes, until her husband stabbed her 19 times in the back. She didn't make it, he is now serving 25 to life. Had a degenerative back problem. In his late 20s, began a series of surgeries that essentially rebuilt his spine from top to bottom. Shortly after the last procedure, went to visit his parents up north for Christmas. Slipped on ice on their front steps and smashed all the work that was done. Committed suicide within a week. Played basketball with these two twins. One guy was 6'8" or so, built like a beanpole and the most carefree guy ever, to the level of irresponsibility sadly. The other was 6'2" and built like the meanest linebacker you've ever seen. They couldn't have looked more different / or acted more different. But thing is, they really were best friends. They were great guys and great players. Fast forward to maybe 5 years after high school. I see the linebacker dude at a conference or something, I'm not sure exactly the context, but he's a software engineer now, graduated from a good school, got a good job. I'm so happy for him. I ask about his brother. He goes super frown, and tells me his brother got leukemia or some other horrible disease, I honestly don't remember which, but basically he got sick like a month after graduation, and terminally, and rotted away and died. The guy was almost in tears telling me. I felt horrible, I gave him a huge hug, I didn't know what to do. It was so weird. I went back home, and asked a few friends who I was still in touch with, and the one guy said it was worse. He got whatever disease, which apparently is genetic / runs in families, so the twin still has to be haunted he'll get it. But then it didn't actually kill the 6'8" dude, the 6'8" dude killed himself cause he didn't want his mom and brother to have to take care of him. The whole thing was like a punch in the gut. I had my first girlfriend in 8th grade. I really liked her. She was my first kiss. We were practically inseparable for almost that whole year, which is a hell of a long time for a middle school romance. She ended up going to a different high school and we drifted apart after that. After I graduated I would sometimes get drunk and look people I used to know up online, but I could never find any trace of her. Years passed, and I stopped thinking about her as much, but I did still occasionally try to look her up. Always drew a blank. Finally, 15 years after 8th grade, I found something online. It was her obituary. She had died of cancer 3 years earlier. She was survived by her husband and 5-year-old daughter. Where do I begin? I'm Black from the inner city. I've lost friends to drug addiction, prison and gun violence. I had one of my friends shot in front of me in a club in Detroit. His brains got on my shirt. I still have nightmares. Got his face blown off by an IED in Afghanistan. Survived, but his nose and one eye are gone, and he has some severe scarring. He'd just gotten married before going down there, but his wife apparently couldn't take seeing him like that and they divorced not long after. My friend joined the army and was deployed twice to Iraq. He was discharged and came home with severe PTSD. He couldn't hold down a job and was on drugs from the VA until after about 6 months they decided he was cured. Then he got into doing crack and started carrying around a gun with him. The last time I saw him he was heading into the mountains at 2 a.m. in the middle of a blizzard, saying this was the only way to get fresh powder. I haven't seen him since and I honestly thought he had died, but I recently found out he was sent to prison after shooting his crack dealer and robbing him. A girl I was friends with in year 8 found out she was pregnant. I hadn't seen her at school for a week or so and she wasn't replying to my texts. Turned out she hanged herself in her bathroom rather than face her parents, teachers, other kids, etc. She was only 15 and the only person who was nice to me. We were both outcasts at school. I saw the death notice in the newspaper and cut it out. I think I still have it in a stationery box of memories that I never want to revisit. My friend Mike died of pneumonia because he went outside without pants on in December. It was 8th grade. Fucking sucked. She was a really smart and creative girl but had a horrible home life. Her dad suicided by jumping in front of a train. Her mom was psychotic and did messed up stuff like killing her pets in front of her. She ended up dropping out of school early and dated abusive older guys who got her into hard drugs. She was an arty and bright girl who was in my English class. I didn't interact with her much, but she was always very kind. She pursued a PhD in philosophy. I ran into her at a train station 15 years ago and we exchanged a couple of emails after that. 2 years later she went out for a bicycle ride in her hometown and disappeared. Our hometown went through a massive search for several days. The entire city seemed involved. Her body was found near a large river. She had been assaulted and killed. No suspect was found until 2 years later when they caught the killer, who subsequently confessed. I was really good friends with a girl from elementary school up until high school. She started hanging out with a rough crowd and pretty much told me to F off. Life moves on. I move out of town. A few months ago, my Facebook feed blows up with "Did you hear about what happened to friend?" I pull up the news story and she was messed up on drugs and killed her own 2-year-old daughter. She is in prison now. My best friend from school is now doing up to 20 years in prison for rape. I'm not all that sad for him because if you're going to rape someone then you totally deserve the full force of the law, but he has 2 young children who suddenly are left without a dad. Not long before that, his brother committed suicide, too. I feel terrible for his mother, losing both of her boys in the space of a year. I also feel terrible for his victim, and for his children. Old bro from high school ran into his girlfriend's burning home to try and save her, but found that she had been stabbed to death by her ex-boyfriend, and it was him who caused the fire. Ex-boyfriend got 16 years in prison. Lost a buddy recently. He was a partier in high school but he never hurt anyone and was a genuinely good guy. We played on the same baseball team all throughout high school. He got out of the small town we grew up in and got a degree all on his own. He met a very amazing girl, married her and had a beautiful baby girl. 2 weeks after she was born he was walking back home from a friend's place down the road. He had had a couple of beers and didn't want to drink and drive. He was walking on a sidewalk on the far side of a ditch and got hit by a drunk driver. The driver somehow made it across the ditch and was able to drive off. His poor wife searched for him for days and it was all over Facebook. It was truly gut-wrenching to see her plead and ask if anyone had seen him. Especially so soon after he had just celebrated his baby girl being born. A good friend of mine from high school went off and joined a frat in college. He was a good kid. Didn't do drugs. Rarely drank. Good grades. As a pledge he was driving a car for an older brother trying to find a parking spot. He was pulled over for expired tags. The cops found weed, cocaine, and Molly in the car. Even though it wasn't his drugs he took the blame. 5 years in prison. Let's go with a combination of sad and funny. Old friend who's been in the Air Force for about 8 years now, had ISIS hack his Facebook account a few months ago. I'm not sure what the end game is, in that case. All they did was post random Arabic messages, they didn't change any of the pictures or settings. I'm just picturing like a little 12-year-old terrorist hunched over a phone screen all day cackling to himself because he's spreading the good word of Allah through the massively influential social network known as Facebook. She was killed in a car accident literally a week after graduating. The guy she was with was super drunk, and decided that it would be fun to race around a winding mountain road going 70+ miles per hour. Ended up they ran straight into a telephone pole that cut their car in half and sliced her torso to shreds. Maybe not as sad as other situations. I ran into a friend years after graduation. We got to talking and I found out she was moving and offered to help. A few days later we got to her house and I was shocked. She was living with a low-life boyfriend in a trashy apartment that they could no longer afford. All the furniture we moved was shabby and broken. Stained and ripped couches. Broken dressers, missing drawers. Nasty-looking mattresses on the floor. When I had known her, she lived with her parents in a nice house. The kind that had a fancy living room for company and then a family den for actual use. Beautiful dining room with dinner served on rare china. That sort of house. I don't know what happened to change her life so. But it was so sad I still think about it 10 years later. I'm a cop and a year ago I was called to a robbery in progress at Walmart. I drive up and outside of the doors there's a crowd of people trying to restrain a young woman. She was fighting like crazy to get away. My partner and I go right in and cuff her. As things cool down she turns around and says, "I know you. We had spent tons of time together in high school in the same organizations." Nice, fun-loving gal with a lot going for her. Now she was getting high and trying to steal Legos from Walmart, and injuring employees in the process. It was one of the saddest arrests I've made. She told me she just wanted to get her kids some toys but the drugs were screwing up her life and she couldn't afford them. Here was this girl that everyone thought was beautiful, both inside and out. Now a deteriorated junkie in the back of my patrol car with a sizable prison sentence waiting for her.